Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, the sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democratic candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds. Who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration across Oklahoma to take his bride of almost 40 years. They are celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary this weekend with a road trip out to the Grand Canyon. So they plan on seeing all of their favorite spaces between here and there, and we bid them safe travels. And we hope they have a fun trip. But in the meantime, while they were gone, we discussed several things that we thought maybe would be a great opportunity with this platform while he was away. And one of the things that we stuck on was a women's roundtable. And I was eager to jump on that opportunity to host several women that we respect in this industry and we respect just in the Democratic Party. And so we've got some really, really big names. Again, my name is Samantha Dawson, and I am co-hosted this morning by the great Calés McGinnis. Good morning, Calais. Let me know if I'm unable to get you on here or if you need my help with anything. I am completely new to this. So
good morning. I'm excited for today's show.
Me too. Okay. So really quickly, obviously Kevin or Dad, I will say Kevin, but please know it pains me to call him Kevin. He does a quick housekeeping. So I'm going to also do that really quick as we see several people hopping on. I want to give everybody who's a speaker time to get settled. And so those housekeepings, please go ahead and share this space so that everybody on your Twitter gets the chance to listen into these powerful voices. Also, we may go longer than an hour today, so if you have to hop off, we completely understand, but this will be recorded and reshared through the Twitter spaces. I believe, Calais, do you share it through like YouTube, Facebook, that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, we are streaming live on YouTube and Facebook right now.
Yes, so please feel free to hop off, hop back on if you need to. But again, these are voices that need to be heard. They want to be heard, and I think that we would all benefit from hearing them. Also, if you have any questions during this, because we have so many voices, again, we don't want anybody's question to go untouched, but if you can leave it within the questions below, we will also leave websites and that sort of thing with show notes today, but please leave any question you have down there. We have a way to end the conversation. We, of course, will make sure that your questions get answered. So again, just put those below, share away, and please know that we are here to listen to everybody's voices and they are important in all of your questions. We hope to. Calais, do you want to do a quick introduction of who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Calés McGinnis, and I host Coffee with Democrats in Arkansas. I just started hosting Coffee with Democrats in, I believe it was March, is when we had our first show. It's been so much fun. I live in Central Arkansas, and I just hopped on to Twitter last summer and I heard your dad in a Twitter space with Coffee with Democrats and started listening and became a regular listener. And now we have Coffee with Democrats in Ohio. We have Coffee with Democrats in Florida, Coffee with Democrats in Connecticut, and Coffee with Democrats in Georgia. So we're expanding, and I am just so excited. I love these conversations, and this conversation in particular is going to be so much fun. Us women are taking over today, so
I agree.
It's going to be so much fun.
Yes, I'm so excited. Callie, I think you have been one of my favorite people to meet through this platform. Obviously, listening is a big part of my role. A little bit about me. I have absolutely learned an incredible amount through this platform. When my dad started introducing this to me, he just kind of was expressing like, this is a great way for us just to meet people across the nation to educate ourselves on what's happening in the political realm. And it really fell in line with where I was at in my life. And this, I will be completely transparent as to who I am. I am a previous red voter who decided to educate myself after the last term of presidency prior to the current president. And I decided I was no longer going to go into voting naive. And I think this is a great platform for that. And I am eager to get the opportunity to speak to women who respect women, who respect themselves, and who want to use a platform to inform other people. And so I am one of those people who needs to be informed. And I also am a person who needs to have tips and tricks on how to go out and have conversations with my red friends, my red family members, and that sort of thing, on how to politely fact check, or but I need those facts. So that sort of thing. That's what I'm so excited about this platform for. So I think now we can probably move over to introducing our speakers for the day. Forgive me if this is the part where my hands start shaking, because I am so excited about the women that we have speaking with us today. So really quickly, if we can go through, I'm going to give a quick introduction, and then I'm going to go back through and have everybody give us a really quick intro to them, and then let's start on the conversation. So I want to welcome Madeline Ryan Smith, Dr. Quintessa Hathaway, Miss Jess Piper, and Miss Gloria Johnson. Everybody, if we can get a good big round of applause in this section. I know it's so weird to ask for people to send emojis, but please send for your applause. We are so excited to see every single one of these women. I hope that you guys are impacted by the conversations and the topics they bring up, because they are all very intelligent and strong women that we can all learn from. So Madeline Ryan Smith, if you want to hop on here and give us a quick introduction as to who you are.
Hey everybody, how are we doing today?
So great, Madeline. It's so good to hear from you again. We were so excited to talk to you last week.
Oh yeah, I love being here. I love Coffee with Democrats. I'm in the same boat as Calais. I've been here since probably last summer. I don't even remember meeting Kevin. I just know that I know him. I could not tell you when that happened.
Well, same. But I mean, that's because I was born.
Right, of course. But yeah, and if I talk too quickly, please let me know, because I'm also very excited and I get ahead of myself and I just talk a million miles an hour when that happens. So if I talk too fast, please stop me.
Well,
and
we'll
I also live in the rural southeast of Georgia, and I live probably 200 meters from train tracks. And we have trains come by through about 8 times a day. So if I like randomly mute, it's because a train is just taking up space and wants to be heard. But aside from that, hello everybody. My name is Madeline Ryan Smith. I'm a current candidate down in Georgia. I am running for Georgia House District 158, which is about an hour east or an hour west of Savannah. It encompasses 4 counties, including Bullitt County, which is where I'm from. I graduated from Georgia Southern University twice. I'm a double eagle. I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in social science, focusing on sociology. I'm also the current Disability Caucus chair for the Democratic Party of Georgia. And that entire role I've stepped into since February, and it has been amazing. And so as far as disability advocacy goes, I have always been a disability advocate. Being a blind woman who also uses a guide dog, it's something that I have to do in my life. But politically, it's very important because, as we know, people with disabilities, there's a lot of intersectionality there, especially when it comes to women's reproductive health care. And I'm very excited about this conversation. So thanks for having me, guys.
Madeline.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Quintessa Hathaway, are you still here with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, you're so to have you. You want to give us a really quick just pitch bio?
First, I'd like to thank everyone that this morning to participate with us and listen in on this roundtable. So first, kudos to you all, as well as to the host, for providing the opportunity for all of us to assemble together for this important conversation. My name is Dr. Quintessa Hathaway. I was the 2022 Democratic nominee for Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District. Through that opportunity, I had a chance to go throughout Central Arkansas and really spread a message of hope and optimism based upon 3 points of transforming pre-K through higher education, economic empowerment and development for all people, as well as expanding all the tenets of voting rights. So that was one component, I believe, that defines who I am and what the political campaign looked like. And then secondly, I'm a small business owner. I go all over the country, providing the best educational strategies to schools and districts and leaders, as well as help individuals grow their business, emerging businesses, as well as their startups. So those are just a couple of things in which I do each and every day.
Oh, that's just a small list of things that you do every day. I can only imagine. I am sorry, I'm like crying over here on the inside that you just seem like you are doing it all. Look at you doing it all. We are excited to have you here. Do you prefer to be called Dr. Quintessa?
Dr. Hathaway, I'm a
Dr.
little formal on that case.
Got it. Okay. I will make sure to appropriately do so. I appreciate you and welcome
Thank
this
you.
morning. Miss Jess Piper.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. This is a great conversation with a whole lot of people that I'm really happy to hear from. My name is Jess Piper, born and bred Southerner. I spent my childhood and young adulthood in lots of Southern states because my dad was in the Navy, but I always claim Arkansas as my home. I graduated with my BA in English and MA in Education from the University of Arkansas. And I'm just an advocate for rural communities and public schools. I was a public school teacher for 16 years. I taught American Lit. And, there were a couple of reasons that I decided to walk away from a career that I absolutely loved and to run for a House seat in Missouri's 1st District. And the key one was because no one was running. I went to vote in 2020. 2020. And I was like, well, there's no one to vote for. And, I get sick of people saying, rural Missouri is the way it is because of the way we vote. Well, friends, if there's no one to vote for, what are we going to do, right? So that was it for me. I decided to run. I lost, but I'm continuing my activism. I'm executive director for Blue Missouri, raise money for down ballot candidates, which helps every candidate in Missouri. I also host a weekly podcast called The Dirt Road Democrat.
Oh, welcome, Miss Jess. Thank you so much for hopping on today, Jessica. We are so excited to have you here. We have talked to you several times, and every single time, I know personally, I walk away feeling like I've learned something. So I appreciate what you do out there for everybody and what you're doing in Missouri. Okay, and this one, my heart is just absolutely going to beat out of my chest. So forgive me. Gloria Johnson, welcome to Coffee with Democrats this morning. We are so excited to have you at our table. Please pull up a chair and give us an introduction.
Hi there, and thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here with everyone. And I'm Gloria Johnson, State Representative for House District 90 in Tennessee, which covers a part of Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm in the red east part of Tennessee. I was also a teacher. I taught special ed for 27 and now I decided, because of the attacks on public education, really, one of the big reasons I ran for office were the attacks on public education and the effort to privatize education, taking away a teacher seat at the table here in Tennessee, but also our lack of Medicaid expansion and the refusal of the supermajority to expand Medicaid. And we are now one of the states with the most rural hospital closures in the country. So that those things are passions of mine, and of course, challenge rights and gun violence are big things that are happening here in Tennessee. So those are a lot of the things that I focus on. And the erosion of democracy in some of our red states is, I know that a lot of people are seeing it, but we're really seeing it here in Tennessee with their limiting debate on bills, not calling on Democrats, cutting mics, and it's and not allowing amendments, all kinds of just really anti-democratic things that we're fighting against here in Tennessee. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Thank you so much for just being here today. I can't wait to hear more from each one of you. I think something that my dad, Kevin, does very well is he gets to know each one of you when he gets the chance to talk to you. He understands where you come from, what your background is as far as like youth through adult that kind of brought you into where you're at with the Democratic Party. And so if you guys have not all listened to those, please go back to the page and listen to those at some point to get to know some of these women that we've had that opportunity to speak with before. Because today I would really like to hone in on what your beliefs are and open that discussion up. Like, I want to also or anything the conversation in that capacity. So please, when we bring up topics, feel free to discuss them at your will, and to the point. We'll just steer the conversation in that direction. So I would like to also just provide this space that Calais is going to lead some questions as far as like just topics go. But for me, I think one of the things that I would like to learn from is why these topics are important for people who may be new to politics and people who are new to the political realm, why it is necessary for us to be educated in some of these topics so that we don't go into them so naive or based off of emotional topics spoken on, like, say, Fox News or on your local Republican radio stations or stuff like that. I would just like for us to be able to have that open conversation. So ladies, please feel open to that and continue that through the conversation. So Calais, is there anything that you want to immediately ask about while we're all here?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I think that's to touch on what you were just talking about. That's why I love Coffee with Democrats is we get to have these conversations, and I never feel when I was listening to your dad's conversations, I never felt like it was over my head. I never felt like I was coming in and listening to a lecture. I was listening to a conversation. I was really sitting there at the table with them having coffee and discussing these different topics. And I really feel like these conversations are important. I like to have them for my Coffee with Democrats in Arkansas. I like to have them be educational. I want them I want people to come in and learn something and use it as a way to connect with people throughout the state. But when I look at this room, there are people from all over the country in here, and I think this is just such a great tool to connect Democrats throughout the country. And we have Democrats throughout the world that are abroad that listen in and they hear what's going on. And these conversations are important, especially going into 2024. Um, so this platform is awesome. I know that sometimes Twitter can be a little too much, but these tools that we have are a great way to connect each other with the different issues. And just talking with Madeline in Georgia and hearing what's going on in Georgia, and then talking with Kevin in Oklahoma and hearing what's going on in Oklahoma, I'm able to see um, what's going on and see how it's very similar to what's going on here in Arkansas. So we can kind of connect that way and work together to try to bridge that gap and see how we can voters.
100%. I completely agree with that. And I think that's what's so important about a platform such as this is making sure that we are able to take the information from a site like this or from a conversation like this and then leave to make it more exciting and more like just more of like a mission to get to the polls. So speaking of the polls, every one of you ladies that are on here today have all run for office. Again, please feel free to turn those mics off and just have an open conversation. Can you tell us what that experience was like for each one of you running?
Oh yeah, I would love to know. Like,
I can go first. I can answer the question
Mhm.
first. Start the convo.
Yeah,
Um,
start it.
So I don't know for the rest of you guys, but my experience running for office, I think I've been asked a lot if being a woman specifically put up a lot of barriers for me running for office. And I can honestly answer no in a privileged manner because I am a white woman in the South of the country. And so me personally for office is a little more like, yes, we need more women. I'm glad you're running kind of attitude about it. I did find barriers in the intersection of being a woman woman with a disability, though, because I cannot physically or legally drive a motor vehicle. I cannot get behind the wheel of a car. And so living in a rural area and needing to travel between 4 counties and having really to rely on people around me to be able to do that, while also needing to fundraise to be able to pay for travel and things like that, that was one of my biggest barriers as a candidate, really just in a rural area and as a disabled person, not necessarily as one disabled person, that I just had huge barriers getting from point A to point B, the physical traversing of my area, which I feel like is not unique just to disabled people. I feel like there's a lot of other ways that that is a barrier for people.
Piggybacking off of what she was saying, I found the same thing here. Though I'm not disabled, I live in a community. There's 480 people in my town, and we take up 4 counties because it's so rural. The district does, and I realized real quickly that I couldn't have some people come and help me because we don't have sidewalks, right? I couldn't have necessarily someone of color out in the middle of nowhere knocking on a door because it's not safe for them. And so when we're talking about rural communities and organizing and who can help and who, you really got to think, you got to use your brain and you got to think about what's going on in your community, in your state, and whether people can physically do it or whether it's safe for people to do it. And so totally agree.
Those are strong points. Those are definitely strong points as far as like bringing people into communities where they're unknown. I personally was raised in several very rural communities. In fact, I am planning to take a trip back to a rural community this summer, and I sometimes go like, what's my best plan of action going back into these communities where people don't know me anymore? Only not because of my safety. I feel just as unsafe walking into some really different parts of town in my city, but again, there's just gun laws and access to weaponry. I think is just kind of my headspace. But bad people are everywhere, and I don't say bad in a that's a blanket term, but people who want to hurt people are in every community. So navigating that has to be something that as women, especially, we have to, not especially, because I think everybody navigates safety differently. But as women, I will say you walk into situations kind of more concerned about what your safety is and checking your back and making sure nobody's following you and that sort of thing. Do you find that on the trail with you at all, or do you guys always feel that fear?
I don't want to dominate the conversation, please, but I feel safe because I keep my male peers around me. That is what I do to combat that situation, is that I bring my partner, I bring male friends, I bring the male members of our Young Democrats at Georgia Southern, and we all canvass and go door to door as a group. You're never doing that alone. That is my number one rule, is the buddy system. But also, I would never, as a candidate, knowingly send out 2 women as a group alone to go knock door to door. It may seem like sexist, which is fine, but that's just reality. That's just something we actually have to do in this area. We have some very interesting characters down here. And as we know, in Georgia, we've just loosened all of our gun laws. So we have everybody and their little sister running around with a handgun. And we've seen, countless stories in the news about people walking up to the wrong door, wrong car, and getting shot. And I would, if a situation like that happened where I sent someone out to door and canvass for me and they got injured in some way, especially with a weapon, I would probably drop out of my race. I don't know what I would be. I don't think I could emotionally handle that situation. And so I try to do everything that I can to avoid that situation. But again, I think last year I ran prior in the midterms in 2022. And during that time, I think there was just a lot of divisiveness in general in politics and just surrounding politics. And quite honestly, door-to-door canvassing at that time, especially how close to COVID that was, we didn't do door-to-door a whole lot. We did a lot of phone banking and a lot of text banking and a lot of tabling and voter registration on campus specifically. So it will adjust, I'm hoping. But, sometimes it's just really not safe. And it's really unfortunate that we live in a country where politicians cannot safely walk door to door and talk about why they need to be elected into office.
For sure. For sure. And I think safety comes to, I mean, I guess when we jump into this conversation, I'm going to kind of just rip it off here. Safety and gun laws. Gloria, I know in Tennessee, especially recently, there's, big headlines about Tennessee right now and gun laws. Can you give us any, just a dive deep into that and your stance on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As I heard someone say, everybody's got a gun, and that's certainly the way it is in Tennessee. And as far as being fearful, I'm typically not. And but recently, after the end of session and the things that happened around me and my two colleagues being um, well put up for expulsion. They were expelled, but I was not. There have been a lot of across the nation. We've gotten quite a bit of negative mail about that and that sort of thing, and I've gotten some rather threatening calls. So I'm certainly cognizant of it, and I'm always cautious. So, but nothing really that has alarmed me that much. But knowing that everyone in Tennessee is armed, and even knowing that, as I'm told, some of my colleagues are armed on the House floor, which is, it's not legal to have guns in our Capitol, but apparently some of my colleagues do. Um, and so we have to be cautious. But I have a state that continually loosens. I mean, you would think there's not much more Tennessee can do to loosen gun laws, but they're certainly doing it. And we have got our governor who's called for a special session August 21st, and I have such hope that maybe we can get something done. Because this is a governor who, had a press conference where he signed the gun bill at one of the new gun manufacturing companies that recently opened in Tennessee. So hopefully we might be able to get something done now. The Gen Z folks, the young people, the parents have really just been present. They had another big rally yesterday. I don't think that people are going to stop rallying until that special session and try to force something to happen, because the safe. Well, not I won't say everybody. A lot of people think that the answer is everybody having a gun. I'm terribly afraid that they're going to try to bargain in this special session and say, oh, okay, we'll do a red flag law, but we're going to arm teachers. Arming teachers is just pure ignorance. And the idea that we want guns to come into our classrooms and want to have gunfights in our classrooms is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And, the idea should be to keep the guns from ever getting near the schoolhouse door. And so that's what we're promoting. Let's protect children and not guns. Let's make sure the guns don't get to the schoolhouse door. And and hearing you guys talk about the rural problems in running for office is just fascinating to me. Part of Knox County is a bit rural, but that's not a part that I have, so I don't have to deal with that. But it's really eye-opening as I think about that, and I do have colleagues running in rural Tennessee. So there's a lot to think about, and there's certainly a lot to consider when the majority. We just had a poll in our state. The majority of people on both sides of the aisle favor common sense gun laws. But unfortunately, the NRA and the Tennessee Firearms Association do not, and they're the ones calling the shots, not the people.
I I've recently been reading a lot of, and it's not anything new. This has been going on for a really long time, but it's just something I've been really researching and just reading a lot of stories, particularly women in domestic violence situations, and where they are killed. They have been in relationships and they've filed protective orders after protective order, and that doesn't stop their abusive partner from using a gun and killing them. Um, what could we do? What what could we do to prevent that? To put at least some barriers in place to prohibit somebody from, if they've got a protective order, from getting a gun.
Just, really clear laws and guidelines on dispossessing those people of weapons. When that's basically an extreme risk protection order, and a lot of times it falls through the cracks on maybe when that was filed, and background checks, and having enhanced background checks, so you're not missing those folks. But those folks need to be dispossessed of their weapons in those situations. And so making sure that your state has laws that ensure that those people have been dispossessed of their weapons.
That would help. I could see that helping. I mean, at least something um, would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Hathaway, you have your speaker on. Or is there anything that you would like to say on this topic?
Yes. I share many of the sentiments with the other panelists with regards to actually my run and being out on the campaign trail. There were many times that I was alone on the campaign trail while I was going to a speaking engagement or holding my own forums and various events. And like Representative Johnson, I don't live in fear of another man. My faith informs me that God is going to protect me everywhere I go. And even if it comes to a point of, loss of life, I know that I stand on the side of right and that my conviction holds true each and every time. Point one. Secondly, when it comes to the area of the Second Amendment and gun reform and gun violence in this country, America has actually gotten quite out of hand. We look at the components and the tenets of the Second Amendment, and it was not designed for us to have these high capacity magazines or weapons of war at the disposal and access of just common people. I know those comments and um, positions are shared by many of our Republican brothers and sisters, whether they are willing to come out from the shadows and make those statements publicly. But we know that for every one individual in this country, we have about 310 million people. That same number of weaponry, firearms, are accessible to the public. Um, we have to do more when it comes to reducing violence in this country, whether it's by firearm or other forms of weaponry. And we also need to go about creating a national peace movement to counter this conversation that is being had by conservatives.
If
We, as Democrats, are the leaders and have more solutions on our side to address, I truly believe, this issue with gun reform and reducing gun violence in the United States of America. When it comes to reducing loopholes and dispossessing individuals for having certain firearms, I think that ought to occur. But what that can look like, I call it like the day after we create this legislation, whether that be local, state, or national. Um, there's going to have to be a bureaucracy put in place to be able to identify, access those weapons from those individuals. What does that database and its security and intelligence looks like? Like, this is not just a conversation that's going to have to be had. This is going to take real intentional measures for all Americans to come into the fold with this new legislation if we are really going to be about the business of redu- reducing the type of weaponry that are out on our streets and accessible to good law abiding gun owners as well as those that have mental health issues.
If I could speak on the Second Amendment for just a second, and thank you so much, Dr. away for talking about responsible gun owners because I'm one my entire life. But what we're seeing in state legislatures is not responsible. And you have people up there passing laws in Missouri. You can have a toddler, and I'm not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. A toddler can carry a loaded gun down a street in Missouri, and there's no crime committed. You see people looking and pointing to Kansas City and to to St. Louis and saying, "Look, the gun violence is out of control." And you're like, "You're right." But who's in control and who's been in control for 20 years, for 2 decades? That's the GOP. And you know what they've done in that time? They have reduced every common sense gun law we had. Children can carry. Anyone can open carry a long gun at 18 years old without a permit or without training. It is absolute madness and extremism. And it's time for regular, responsible gun owners to stand up and say enough. Because the biggest threat to 2A is the insanity, the extremism that's going on right now. You want to lose all gun rights? You let these people keep walking through the streets of St. Louis and Kansas City and gunning people down, right? You let gun suicide go rampant in rural areas, right? That's how you get rid of the Second Amendment, not because you passed a law saying, hey, you should have a permit to open carry, or maybe everyone should have a background to have a gun. Maybe if you threaten your wife and your kids and kick your dog, you shouldn't have access to loaded guns, right? All we want is common sense. And what we're seeing in GOP's supermajority red states is insanity. And we have to stop it. And we stop it by electing other people, taking them out of office, making sure if you're an extremist, you're going to lose your primary, and we're going to make sure that you have someone that's going to go against you on the Democratic side.
Oh my gosh, I love your passion. If I could bottle that passion up, I would just literally, I think I would drink it every day. Okay. So while I love this conversation about the guns themselves, and I think that we are on the right track with that. Obviously, I think that any chance we have to talk about taking guns off the streets from people who don't need them in their hands is a great conversation. But I want to tie this back into our education system. So forgive me for kind of turning this just a touch, because several of you are educators and several of you have high opinions about education. I personally have family members in the education system. And so I want to tie this back to a comment that was made previously about bringing guns into school. Having school teachers, bear arms to protect children.
Accuracy for the police in a situation where return fire is happening is less than 30%. Showing a riot. It's just ridiculous for me to think about, and it has to be men who think this is a real solution. It's just outrageous. And I talked to a man one time and I said, well, and I taught high school. What if those high school kids got that gun from me? Oh, well, if they go for your gun, you shoot them. I'm not shooting one of my students.
I've heard that from several people who have said that same thing, that they don't have a desire to shoot the children in their school.
It is ridiculous, and it goes against everything that is common sense, because the common sense says we don't want the guns ever getting to the schoolhouse door. How do we prevent that? These folks want a gun battle at the schoolhouse door or in a classroom. They don't want to prevent guns from getting to that classroom. It's why, they're not about prevention when it comes to anything, really. And I think that one of my colleagues alluded to that earlier. Why are we not talking about prevention? If you want to prevent violence, let's prevent the things that get people desperate. Let's raise the wage. let's make sure people have access to health care so they can get the mental health care that they need. Let's make sure that people get a good education that lifts them up in their society and they're not feeling left behind. Preventive measures is where we need to focus our time and energy. We've already got the consequences thing locked up. But what we need to do is focus on those things that prevent people from taking that path. And that is making sure that we don't leave whole communities and leave people behind. And
Absolutely.
it's investing in communities so that that is not what people feel they have to resort to. And one of the dumbest things that people say to me, and I think it's a dumb and lazy argument that, well, the criminals will always get guns. Don't make the laws because criminals will always get guns. Well, guess what? Criminals are always going to murder. They're always going to rob, but we make laws against those things so that there are consequences when they break them. So to say we're not going to pass gun laws because criminals will just break them, why do we need a legislature? Why have any laws?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that is such a ridiculous, lazy argument. In that case, abortion laws don't work. People are going to get abortions anyway. Let's not have any abortion laws. It doesn't
Absolutely.
make sense to say criminals will still get guns. Criminals will still murder, but we've got to have consequences for those things.
Absolutely. Madeline?
Yeah, I was just going to echo when you said, what teacher is going to shoot their student. That was exactly what I raised my hand to say. When I was in undergraduate school, I actually taught preschool for 3 years on our campus. We have a child development center on our Georgia Southern campus where we teach 6-month-old all the way up to like the year before preschool. And I always taught the older preschoolers. So the right before you go to kindergarten, that was my class. And on any I would be sitting in a class often, almost every day, about what I would do if somebody with a gun walked in this right now. What would I do? I'm only one person. What 2 kids would I save if I could? And so this whole concept of having teachers be armed is already something we see on our college campus down here at Georgia Southern. We have open carry on our campus. You as a professor and you as a student, if you are legally allowed to own a gun, which pretty much now everybody can, you are allowed to bring it into your classroom and have it on campus. Unless you have a student in your classroom who's a minor, and you're not allowed to bring a gun. It's amazing how that just switches things. But we have a lot of access to guns on campus. We even have a shooting sports center that is owned by our university where you can go shoot in a rifle range, you can go participate in archery, or you can store your gun on campus. We have a very gun-centric campus. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And like we've all been saying, arming teachers is the most illogical solution. It's the most illogical band-aid we have to this problem. And that's really what it is. And that's what irks me so much with these Republican representatives is that they pass legislation that they think solves a problem, but in reality, it's a band-aid that's trying to stop a fire hydrant leak, and we're not getting to the root of the problem. If we look at mass shootings, especially in schools, we see that overwhelmingly these shootings are being committed by young men that are also Caucasian that have a history of violence or substance abuse in the home. That statistically has been a pattern that we've seen. So if we can understand that maybe the root of the problem is that background of trauma in your childhood, that abuse that you've experienced as a child, the toxic masculinity that we see among young men, the access to guns, the glorification of gun culture, especially in places like the South, where are we solving those problems? I don't see any band-aids trying to fix that. So if we can somehow regroup and understand that, hey, maybe all of these things have a deeper rooting to the issue, maybe we can start to solve some of these problems. But us just listening and regurgitating what we hear from Fox News and the GOP, that's not going to solve these problems. We need to be listening to people who actually know the facts, know the science, know the sociology behind these things, understand why gun violence happens. We need doing grassroots movements in our own areas, in our own counties, about why we don't want loose gun access, we don't want loose gun laws, and what it means to pass common sense gun legislation. That's the biggest thing that I run into, especially here, is that I run into a lot of conservatives that say, oh, I don't want Democrats to take my guns. Nobody's advocating for that. Nobody's advocating for us wiping our country clean of all firearms. We just want common sense legislation so I don't have to worry about myself or my child getting shot when they go to school every day, or when I go to the grocery store, or when I go and watch a movie. I would
education buildings. We've seen that, especially, I mean, it just seems like this year, 2023, we've seen several mass shootings. I mean, it's been heavy for as long as media has been around, where we hear about bars being shut up. We hear all these things, but like I when I was in my early 20s, I worked in a mall atmosphere, and I went to bed one night and I had a nightmare. The shop that I worked in was right outside of the children's play area, and it was connected to the Sears that went out to the Bain parking lot. I had a dream that like somebody came in and they just started shooting up that area because the parents were sitting ducks in that area. And I remember thinking, how am I going to protect myself? How am I going to protect all these people? I don't have a back way access. It's a scary world that we live in, when we have to take into consideration how we're going to protect ourselves against a weapon. When I'm sorry, I don't know about you guys, I don't care to carry a gun, because I do not care to murder people, even in self-defense. To me, I would not personally be about the business. But I think common sense, you're right, is definitely rare, and it's not utilized in these laws. Also, I had somebody I really respect tell me one time that if the government wanted to take a gun, in regards to the argument of they can't take my guns away. Well, if the government truly wanted to take a gun away, a gun's not going to stop a tank to take it. But we're not going to go through those measures. The government's not going to take guns away from people or access to it. It's just utilizing the common sense to regulate them. I agree. And I think that's great points on all fronts on that. Dr. Hathaway, do you also have an opinion on this?
This folds into the conversation. I just want to speak to the fact that as Democrats, we are going to have to get in the story, whether that's on our local school boards, whether that's on our city councils or board of directors. More liberal ideas are going to have to come out of those entities. We're going to have to come into the majority in our state legislatures, especially throughout the South, where much of this festering of domestic terrorism and issues around gun violence is most persistent. And we're also going to have to come into the majority in our federal national legislature, because we know what is being produced out of the Republican conservative think tank. We hear it all the time, and that is really what's captured the imagination and pushed forward the conversation more, because we know that they are counter to us as Democrats. And what that strategically ought to look like, or could look like, is ongoing voter registration and citizenship education. I believe that we have communities that are so detached from the political system because they are low information, and because we are in a position where we're so inundated with other things, the inner workings of just everyday life, that we become apathetic or desensitized to the political system. But everything that matters to us as Americans, as Tennesseans, as Georgians, as Missourians, as people of conscience, is all tied up in voting and the political processes. And until we begin to create more conversations and put ourselves in a position where liberal thinking, where democratic, forward, progressive thinking becomes the dominant portion of our conversation and our legislation, we're in for something. That this deterioration of this thing called the American experiment with democracy, we're in for something, you all. And I've listened to everyone's comments, and I think it began to get a little heavy, just to me. So I wanted to kind of turn the conversation in a little bit of a different direction. But we have got to get more activated Like, even everyone that is present listening, and as this is shared over various mediums and platforms, we're going to have to do the hard work of mobilizing and create greater attention around this thing, to the point that we feel like it's a revolution, that we feel like it's a new civil rights movement, because everything that was endured in the 1950s and 60s, and even in the 1970s, they've cropped up again, just in a new form. But there's no words of revolution that are being pushed out into the political ecosystem. And I'm going to stop right there.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think that you bring up a really great point. I do think we're getting heavy in these topics. And again, when I was talking to Calais about this roundtable, one of the things that I expressed to her as a need for me and for people who are listening is I did need a little bit of this heaviness, because I need to know how I can adequately go out and take the flame from me and spread it to the person next to me. What facts do I get to bring with me to the next table? What information can I take from women whom I respect, who are knowledgeable of these topics, that I can take and I can say, you can listen to people who exaggerate, people who sensationalize particular topics, such as gun laws, such as abortion laws, such as civil rights. And you can say it's been sensationalized to a degree that people are okay with spouting lies or misinformation. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to just kind of put that sensationalism aside and just kind of talk the topic. Madeline, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo everything that Dr. Hathaway was just saying. Dr. Hathaway, you are absolutely 100% correct that we need to be doing these grassroots efforts. And if you don't, I've talked to so many people. This is exactly the work I've been doing for an entire year, y'all. I've been trying to get people as involved in our party as humanly possible. And I've been trying to get people to run for office, school board, county commissioner, city council, all those things. Municipal elections are on off years 2023. Look in your area. I guarantee you there's an election, somewhere, some seat that is up for election in 2023. If you don't want to actually run for office, run for a position with your county party. Be your county chair, be your county communications officer, be your county's treasurer. If you don't want to do that, join a caucus with your state party. We only have, I think, in the entire country, out of all 50 states and abroad, we only have 20 disability caucuses in the entire country. So if you're in a state that doesn't have a state disability caucus, please make one and let me know. There are so many opportunities we have to get really involved in politics, and it doesn't necessarily have to be running for office. It can be a lot of different ways. You can get involved in a PAC or a lobbyist group. You can do voter registration. You can do the nonpartisan side of policy and voter education. There's a lot of things that we can do. We just need to do it. And I think that some of the barrier really is, especially in areas where it's a really red area and you're a very small blue dot in a red sea of people, it's very intimidating to be like, hey, I'm a Democrat and I'm standing up for my beliefs. It's much easier when you have a buddy. So find a peer, find a group of peers, find 2 or 3 people that have similar beliefs to you at your church, at your school, at your place of work, wherever, and get involved, get organized, get motivated, and start acting. And it's once you start the ball rolling and people gather along with you, then you have a whole movement, and that's how grassroots efforts grow. So that's the only thing that I wanted to say, but thank you so much for bringing that up, y'all.
So I'm going to switch the topic up a little bit. I know that we're approaching 1 hour. Again, if anybody needs to hop off, we understand this will be recorded. So anything that goes over the hour will be accessible to you later through all platforms that we are sharing this through, including Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. But I want to quickly, while we have women at the table, I want to just bring up reproductive rights. And it's a really touchy subject when it comes to anybody communicating about this. But I have read several of your bios and your stance on it, and I just kind of want to open the platform up for people to kind of give for people to hear your opinions about them, and for them to understand the information that you have regarding the new laws that are being put into place, and why we need to put a stop to it, or why we need to educate ourselves to better converse about it.
If I could speak about it for just a second with what's going on in Missouri. Missouri was the first state who jumped as soon as Roe was overturned. Our attorney general could not get in front of a camera quick enough. I think it was 8 minutes later, he was signing a complete abortion ban. But in places like where I am, I live in the northwest corner of the state. St. Louis is 5.5 hours from me. That is the only clinic in the entire state that offers abortion care. It's been banned for my district for decades. We don't have access to it. We haven't had access to it. Our girls either gave birth as teenagers, or if they were, had enough money and had a way, they would get out of the state. And we see an attack on that now too. We had a representative and I'm real passionate about stuff. And so when I talk, I can tend to be heavy because I'm living in a straitjacket right now. And so I come across as passionate because I am. But we had a representative last session who decided to write a bill saying that you would be committing a crime if you left the state while pregnant. Well, there's a whole lot of questions about that, right? We just passed yesterday a bill banning trans healthcare for kids. And now these kids can't play on sports teams. And the thing I'm telling you right now is this is all a war on women. A lot of people will look at trans healthcare bans and think, well, that didn't have anything to do with me. Yes, sir, it does. It has everything to do with you, because if they can ban parents and doctors from giving children the care that they need, they can ban anything. Not one of us is safe in one of these states. And as long as we have these super majorities that are insane and doing whatever they want with no pushback, right? In Missouri, 40% of seats went unopposed last year. That means 66 Republicans walked down to the state house free and clear. We told them, hey, do whatever you want because we're not even going to run against you. 2.5 million Missourians had no choice on their ballot. And that's the problem. We're chasing our tails. We're chasing our tails on abortion. Trust me to teach history, how long decades Republicans have been at this, and then understand how far we have to go. But we can do it. We have hope that we can do it, but it's going to take getting Democrats in office.
Yeah, I would have to say in Tennessee, as soon as the Dobbs decision happened, we lost everything because we had a trigger ban in place that was no abortion anytime, anywhere, and no exceptions. The supermajority lost the bill in Tennessee. Even today, if you go to the description of the bill, it says there is an exception for life of the mother. And that's just a bald-faced lie. There was no exception in that bill for life of the mother. There was what's called an affirmative defense. And an affirmative defense means you can be charged, you have to hire a lawyer, you lose your medical license, and you have to defend yourself in court on the fact that was required, that procedure was required to save that woman's life. So that is not an exception. Exception means you're not going to be indicted or charged with that. But an affirmative defense means that you're going to have to defend yourself and prove that you had to do what you did to save the mother's life. They said they were going to fix that and create a real exception in our session this year, the one we just finished, and they absolutely did not. The only thing that they made an exception for is an ectopic pregnancy. And so therefore, that is the only thing that is allowed at this point. And so doctors are still at the mercy and when it comes to saving a woman's life. And what this bill does is it creates a situation where the doctor benefits and is less likely to be charged the more endangered the woman's life is. So, doctors with fear of a 15-year sentence to prison, what is going to happen? Do they violate their oath? Or do they, wait until the very last minute to save a woman's life? It's ludicrous. And the reality is, and I think that the way that we need to talk about this is, which so many people don't talk about, is women are now second-class citizens. Women are not equal. If we do not have bodily autonomy, we are not considered equal citizens. And this is something we should be screaming about.
Well, I remember a time, again, when I was voting red and I was younger, and I stayed naive because it hurt too bad to know facts. By hurt too bad, I mean, I just would rather have been ignorant to things than to be knowledgeable. It benefited me to be ignorant at a time in my life, and it does not any longer. It serves me nothing. And anytime I meet a woman who I think is in the same position, I like to have those really deep conversations about why they choose to stay ignorant. But my question to you, Miss Gloria, as well, is in regards to healthcare for pregnant women,
Right.
and having access. I think both my ignorance, but also I used to think that women were not suppressed, but I think that all citizens are suppressed without access to healthcare. But what about pregnant women specifically in Tennessee without healthcare?
Well, sure. That's one of the reasons we have one of the highest maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates. They're patting the Republicans are patting themselves on the back since they've outlawed abortion in any form. We're going to give you a year's worth of maternity care after the birth. But the problem is is having care up to that point you become pregnant. You want to be healthier going into a pregnancy, and we prevent women from being able to do that. And we all know that black maternal mortality, so many of those people, 10-year-olds will be forced to carry a pregnancy in the state of Tennessee, period. That's it. There is nothing that prevents that. That is what we are going to do. And one of my colleagues in the legislature lost her baby late term, an African American woman, and she's fighting very hard for this because it affects her community to expand Medicaid in Tennessee at zero cost to our state. It doesn't cost a single penny. And they're refusing to it. Criminal, as far as I'm concerned, to refuse care to people, force them to become pregnant or carry a pregnancy, but not allow them to be healthy throughout their lives, which is going to put their pregnancy who has access to care. It's just ludicrous.
Absolutely, Calais.
Yeah. Talking about these bans, my question to everybody is, these are teaching.
I can tell you exactly that in Tennessee, the residents aren't coming to Tennessee. Resident, and you have choice. You are not going to come to Tennessee because you can't even get everything to be certified in the state of Tennessee now that we don't do that. And so they're not going to come here. And an article just came out. More than half of our rural hospitals no longer do deliveries. And that is because we have not expanded Medicaid, because we are short OBGYNs, and everything that this state is doing is going to make that 10 times worse.
Can I speak to this for just a moment?
Absolutely.
Health minorities and people of color and those that are poor And to the point that, and this is was and still is a part of my platform and position, that we really need to be about the business of high quality preventative health care, as well as treating women that are impregnated, as well as those after they've delivered their children, with a greater sense of equality. I'm going to inject this into the conversation too. The census informs us that whites in this country are becoming the minority. My position tells me that that has already happened. That's just where I stand. And I believe that the intention behind the Dobbs decision and the erosion of Roe v. Wade set precedents for 50 years of said law. It was and still is designed so that the white population can increase in the United States of America. You know, I know oftentimes Democrats, we're accused of playing the race card, or people of color are accused of playing the race card, but I believe that is the intention. At all costs, even at the expense of life and death, Republicans are pro-fetus but not pro-life. They are anti-women, anti-LGBTQI plus communities. They are anti-intelligence. I mean, and it just runs the gamut. And it goes back to what some of the previous panelists said. Until we in all levels of government become active and mobilized in such a way that we counter the conversations, until we are able to put ourselves in a position to counter the legislation that is coming out of these state houses, that is coming out of the U.S. House of Representatives, that are coming out of our local school boards, we are in for a fight, people. And we have to articulate that we are in a fight for a new America. This is hard work. And I'm so glad to be sitting on this panel and having this conversation with like minds that are about the mobilization and activation of our American political system. We are in a fight, you all. And Republicans, what they have been able to do is not only articulate a 4-year message, they are looking out into the ether of 40 years, as well as 150 years out. And I've taught this to my students over the years. You know, I call myself an activist educator because I'm going to tell my kids the truth each and every time we walk into that classroom together. But we have got to see this thing for what it is and articulate our message in a stronger, more holistic way, and recognize that there's an interconnectivity and that there's an intersection of who is for America and expanding equality and equity for all people, and those that are in opposition to where we truly stand.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Every word. Every word. Thank you so much, Dr. Hathaway.
Okay.
More.
I want to steer just really quick. We've talked a lot about women's rights now and, well, women's representation. And so, again, this is an open question. Please feel free to just hop in. How important is it that we support women who are running for office? I mean, obviously, we want to see more Democratic names on the ballot as a whole, but how important is it to each one of us that it's a woman on that ballot?
I don't know how it is in your states. When I first went into the House, it was about 17 or 18% women. It's now 10% women. We only have 2 women in the Democratic caucus, and I think there's 8 or 9 in the Republican caucus, and that's horrifying to me. I think we absolutely have to support the right person, but we need to recruit as many women as possible, because women are 52% of Tennessee. We should be 52% of the legislature. And the fact that we are 10% is a serious problem. And part of that is, you know, the women, I think, in the Republican caucus, because they are so few, they feel like they can be taken out by their supermajority at any time. It seems like when they've gotten rid of someone in their caucus, it's been a woman. And it's really discouraging. But people who aren't registered, and my friend Rep Jones kind of calls it a third Reconstruction. And I think that he's right, and I think we need to build for that and get more folks elected. And I think that having conversations like this across state lines and everything is really, it's going to be so helpful in all of that. But I just appreciate this conversation that we're having, and the ability to grow and build and push that movement that is going to motivate people to go vote, motivate them to register to vote. Because when you register people, you also have to follow up with them. When they first get registered, if you don't follow up, only 20% of the folks you register typically vote. But if you follow up with them, you get a much higher percentage. And if you can get someone to vote 2 cycles in a row, then that sort of indicates they'll become a regular voter. And that's what we need to build this movement. So it's that follow up when you register somebody as well. And we have got to focus on women. I think we're going to get, we find that women tend to be more collaborative when they are in elected office, and they tend to be consensus builders. And I just think that that is really important moving forward, building this, multiracial, multi-generational, these legislatures that we want to see.
For sure. Ladies, what piece of advice would you give someone who's considering running for office?
I could give a lot of advice to run for office. Just as generally as a candidate, I have 2 parts to this answer. First part would be just purely as a candidate, you will be surrounded by people during your entire campaign that will give you really bad advice, a lot of unsolicited advice, and sometimes really good advice. You as a candidate have to be able to sift through all the BS and figure out what you should be doing. Everybody will want to help you. Everybody will say, oh yeah, I'm going to volunteer. And then maybe they'll, do their work and da-da-da-da. You cannot rely on the same group of people for a year to do your campaign. You cannot rely on, a very small knit group of people that might be a very small peer group to get this kind of work done. That was a lesson that I learned the hard way the first time I ran. I ran with a team of 8 people, but they were 8 people that were in school with me, and nobody had prior experience on campaign politics or anything. We still 30% of the vote, but we didn't win. And so time around, bringing more people with more experience onto my team, having paid staff, reaching out my social circles for help with this campaign. And I think that's something that Gen Z candidates really need to learn, is that we need to be branching out from our own circles and bringing other people that might not always agree with what we're saying, have an easier way of keeping us accountable as candidates and things like that. That's what I say 1. 2, I will just say, as a huge disability advocate, if you do not include disability policy in your messaging as a candidate, you are not actually progressive. I will die on this hill. If you do not include disability policy in any of your messaging, you will lose the vote, the disabled population. The disabled population in America makes up 25% of our population. That's just measured disability, okay? Diagnosed and identified disability. So in reality, our population is much higher than that. That politicians in general need to be paying more attention to accessibility, disability policy, and disability inclusion, and especially in things like education, healthcare, and employment. And that is all I will say. That's my soapbox.
I love it. I love that I had so many questions written down about asking you about this, like your stance on the disability, just the movement, and I didn't even have to ask it. You are so good at bringing it into conversation, Madeline. As always, I love hearing you talk about it because I love your passion for it. Um, Dr. Hathaway, Representative Johnson, do either of you have just pieces of advice to give?
One of the best things I heard was a training that I was at when Wellstone was doing their trainings, and for people to be aware of. They said that running for office is one of the loneliest things you'll ever do, and I learned that that is so true because most people don't understand what it is completely like, and so it's hard to find people to talk to that understand it. And just being cognizant of that and making sure you have that team around you, you have those folks that you can talk to and that will give you good, honest feedback, and
Mhm.
that will be there for you when you need it is just really, really critical. But I just remember that that's just been etched in my mind so much that it is a lonely thing to do because there's so few that actually understand it.
Absolutely. Dr. Hathaway, do you have a reflection on that as well?
As you all know, I just came off of the campaign trail this last 2022 cycle. There are a few things that I was able to just really reflect upon once the campaign ended in some regards. My recommendation to anyone that wants to get involved in the political arena is to, one, you're going to have to build a team, a really good team of advisors, mostly individuals that are already involved in the political arena or that are retired members of the political arena, to be able to give you some key pieces of information to just help you wield your way through running for office and setting some realistic benchmarks, strategic benchmarks where you want to be along the campaign at specific points, as well as reaching out to future constituents on the ground that have some power. So you need to have those conversations with your local community organizers, organizations that are able to draw more people into the tent, as well as hold forums and events that draw out large sums of people so those individuals can help carry your message for you, because you can't do it all by yourself. I learned that much so last election cycle. Also, we are going to have to be about the business of acquisition of large sums of campaign capital and campaign financing, as well as long-term committed human capital. I heard one of the other panelists make that comment as well. We need individuals on our side, whether they are paid staff or volunteers, that are willing to go the long haul with us. Because being a one woman or one man show out in this field, it becomes not only grueling, it can make the process difficult. So you need people, you need, as far as personnel, you also need financing that is going to help spread the message. One thing that I also noticed, and we haven't brought this as much into the conversation, but we need to be about the business also of pushing back against this more conservative media and not giving us enough space to be able to articulate our message, whether that be in social media, newspaper, print, television. We have to fight, and I'm going to keep calling it a fight, you all, but we have to be in the fight to call out these reporters, these commentators that are not giving us the option to be able to be a bright light and spread a better message, because we hold the message. Democrats have a better message, and it's going to take a holistic effort in order for us to change these dynamics of what American politics looks like right now. Another piece, and I promise I'm gonna let you all go, but as we're out on the campaign trail, those that plan on running for office again, or people that are seeking to just throw their names in the hat, education and visibility are two things that walk hand in hand. You have to be present. People need to be able to see you, to identify, because when your name shows up on that ballot, either they are already familiar with you or they're not. They're either going to vote down ballot, specifically party, or not. They're going to skip over you because they aren't able to identify. Or you have those individuals that are just rogue and just want to stay with the status quo. So we have to be able to find our niche over the course of the campaign trail. My suggestion is be willing to do this thing for more than one cycle. So that looks like whenever that individual decides they want to announce their run, be willing to do that campaign for at least a year or more, and be prepared that next time around to run, just in case, especially in this old conservative South, to do that thing again and broaden the conversation. And in the downtime, and this was advised to me by one of my political advisors that lives in Tennessee, my home state of Nashville, Tennessee. She told me this here recently. She said during the off cycle or during the off season, you still need to be able to hold events, still hold forums and speaking engagements, but not just for yourself, but for entire communities, and still sit in on those, meetings. Because we have, as politicians, a wealth of expertise. No matter how long we've been out here doing this thing, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it doesn't matter. But we have a wealth of expertise to be able to share to other people. Okay.
I love that. I
Yes.
thank you so much for that. Callie, do you have any personal questions? Do you guys have questions for each other?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say before we close up, I cannot thank the speakers enough for coming and sharing your time with us and sharing your thoughts and opinions and everything with us. I am completely in awe by all of you. Um, I absolutely adore each one of you. I love just seeing women out here, strong women that aren't afraid to speak their mind and to fight for democracy and to fight for America and people. And you're just such an inspiration, all of you. Honestly, cannot thank you enough.
Absolutely. I second that. And if you ladies don't have any questions for each other or anything, I think I'm going to go ahead and start closing this out for today. I'll give you one more second just to ask if you do.
I do want to give a shout out for next week. We're going to do another roundtable next Thursday, same time, 10 a.m. Central.
Which we're excited about again, because it's going to be both of us here back with you again, because Kevin is on his way to spend the week with his lover, celebrating 40 years of wedded bliss, I will say, because I am their daughter and I make their life blissful. But we look forward to this opportunity again. I can't express just, I feel like I have a massive case of imposter syndrome in a room full of such educated and so well-spoken women who have such a passion to communicate about topics that are generally they're tough to talk about, and you guys do it so eloquently. And I can't express my thanks enough for your time this morning. So with that, I have notes that I'm going to go home and I'm going to educate myself with, and I look forward to doing this again. I hope you guys come back next week to listen to Calais and I do this all over again. And until then, be safe out there. Thank you.